The billionaire froze mid-bite, staring at the homeless nanny on his TV screen not because of her story, but because of the birthmark on her wrist that matched his own down to the broken line and crooked angle. He'd spent 34 years believing he was the only one with that mark, a remnant from a hospital fire that erased his past and left him with no family, no history, no answers. But if she had it too, then everything he'd been told his entire life was a lie, and someone, somewhere, knew exactly why. And in less than 72 hours, that mark would lead him to a truth so dark, even the hospital tried to bury it with fire. The fork hit the plate with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent office. Leighton Ward didn't blink, didn't breathe. His eyes locked on the flat-screen TV mounted across the room, where a news anchor's voice faded into background noise. All he could see was her wrist. The woman on the screen stood on a rainy street corner, thin coat pulled tight against the wind. Her sign read, "Former nanny. Lost my job defending a child. Need work." But Leighton didn't care about the sign. He cared about the mark on her left wrist, a crooked crescent with a broken line cutting through it. Faded, uneven, unmistakable. Because it was identical to his. His assistant Nora rushed in, eyes wide. "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't answer. His legs moved before his brain caught up, carrying him across the office until he stood inches from the screen. The camera zoomed in on the woman's face, exhausted, proud, refusing to cry. Then it panned down again, to her hands, to that wrist. "Rewind it," he said, voice flat and cold. "What?" "Rewind. The footage." Nora fumbled with the remote. The segment rewound. The woman appeared again, holding her sign, sleeve slipping back. There, that mark. Same angle. Same shape. Same story carved into skin. "Hi viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story." Leighton lifted his own wrist slowly, turning it toward the light. The mark he'd carried his entire life stared back at him, a question he'd never been able to answer. His adoptive mother had called it a hospital mistake, a temporary ink stamp used during chaos, a fire, lost records, no family. But now, 34 years later, a stranger on a news broadcast wore the exact same mistake. "Who is she?" he demanded. Nora leaned closer to the screen as the segment ended. "It says her name is McKenna Soleil. She's a nanny who got fired after taking a sick child to the hospital without the parents' permission. The family blacklisted her. No one will hire her now." Leighton's jaw tightened. "Where is she?" "Atlanta, I think. That's where the station is based." He turned away from the TV, mind racing. His entire life had been built on unanswered questions. Where did he come from? Who left him? Why was he the only one with that mark? And now, standing on a street corner begging for work, was a woman who might hold every answer he'd ever needed. "Cancel my meetings," he said, voice sharp and final. "All of them?" Nora asked, confused. "Every single one." "For how long?" He grabbed his phone and coat, already moving toward the door. "Until I find her." "Mr. Ward, wait. What is this about?" He paused at the threshold, glancing back at the frozen image on the screen. McKenna's face. Her wrist. That mark. "This isn't about charity, Nora," he said quietly. "This is about my life." He walked out, leaving the half-eaten meal, the contracts, the empire he'd built from nothing. None of it mattered anymore. Because somewhere in Atlanta, a woman he'd never met was wearing proof that he wasn't alone. And he wasn't going to stop until he knew why. The jet engines hummed beneath him, but Leighton couldn't hear them. All he heard was the echo of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He sat alone in the cabin, staring at the frozen screenshot on his tablet. McKenna Soleil. Her face filled the screen, tired eyes, clenched jaw, that sign held like a shield. And below it, zoomed in until the pixels blurred, was her wrist. He lifted his own arm and placed it beside the image. Perfect match. The crescent. The broken line. Even the angle was the same, like someone had stamped them both with the exact same tool at the exact same moment. But that was impossible. wasn't it? His phone buzzed. Nora's name flashed across the screen. He ignored it. She'd been calling non-stop since he left the office, asking questions he didn't have answers to yet. Questions like, "Why are you flying to Atlanta tonight? What do I tell the board? Are you coming back?" He didn't know. All he knew was that 34 years of silence had just cracked wide open, and the only person who could explain it was standing on a street corner, holding a cardboard sign. Leighton leaned back in the leather seat and closed his eyes. His mind drifted to the letter his mother had left him before she died. He'd read it so many times the paper had started to tear at the folds. "You were found in a hospital chapel, wrapped in a blanket, with no name. There was a fire. Records were destroyed. They used an ink stamp on your wrist because the machines were down. We were told you had no family. We chose you, Leighton. You were ours." From that moment on, he'd believed her. Why wouldn't he? She and his father had given him everything, a name, a home, a future. But they couldn't give him the one thing he'd always needed, the truth. Now, somewhere below him in the dark city sprawl of Atlanta, that truth was waiting. The plane touched down just after midnight. Leighton didn't waste time. He climbed into a black SUV and gave the driver the address Nora had sent him, the last known location where McKenna had been spotted. The streets were empty. Streetlights flickered. The air smelled like rain and exhaust. He stared out the window, watching the city blur past, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not the kind that comes from losing money or missing a deal. The kind that comes from realizing your entire life might have been built on a lie. The SUV slowed. The driver glanced back. "This is it, sir?" Leighton looked out at the corner. A few scattered people walked by, heads down. A bus stop. A closed storefront. No sign of her. "She's not here," the driver said carefully. "Wait," Leighton ordered. He stepped out into the cold night air, coat pulled tight. His breath came out in short clouds. He walked to the exact spot where the news crew had filmed her. The pavement was still damp from earlier rain. A crumpled coffee cup sat near the curb. She'd been here, but now she was gone. His chest tightened. He pulled out his phone and dialed Nora. "Find her," he said the second she answered. "Sir, it's 1 a.m. I don't care what time it is. Hire investigators. Search shelters, motels, churches. Use facial recognition if you have to. I want to know where McKenna Soleil is by sunrise." There was a pause. Then Nora's voice came back, quieter. "Mr. Ward, are you sure about this?" He looked down at his wrist, at the mark that had haunted him since childhood. The one piece of him that didn't make sense. The one part of his story no one could explain. Until now. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said. He ended the call and stood there in the silence, staring at the empty corner. Somewhere in this city, a woman who looked nothing like him, who came from a completely different world, was walking around with the exact same scar. And he wasn't going to rest until he knew why. Because if she had answers, then maybe, just maybe, he could finally stop feeling like a man who didn't belong anywhere. The wind picked up. A siren wailed in the distance. And Leighton Ward, the billionaire who had everything, realized he was chasing the one thing money couldn't buy. The truth about who he really was. Leighton sat in the hotel room, with the lights off, staring at a single piece of paper. His mother's letter. The one she'd written before the cancer took her voice. Then her breath. Then everything else. He'd kept it in a locked drawer for 2 years, unable to throw it away but too afraid to read it more than once. Tonight, he read it again. "Leighton, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. And I need you to know the truth. I couldn't say out loud. You are my son in every way that matters, but not by blood. We adopted you when you were just days old. The hospital called us in the middle of the night. There'd been a fire in the records wing. Chaos everywhere. Babies crying. Machines down. They were using ink stamps on wrists to keep track of who was who. You were one of them. They told us you had no family. No mother came forward. No father claimed you. You were alone. So we chose you. And I have never regretted that choice for a single second. But I know you've always wondered. I see it in your eyes when you stare. At that mark, I see the questions you don't ask, And I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I couldn't give you more answers. All I know is this. You were born at Street Mercy General Hospital. The fire destroyed everything. And somewhere in that chaos, you became ours. I hope that's enough. I hope you can forgive me for the things I don't know. Love always, Mom. Leighton folded the letter slowly, his hands shaking. He'd forgiven her a long time ago, but forgiveness didn't fill the empty spaces inside him. How many people live their whole lives wondering where they came from? If this story speaks to you, don't let it disappear. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Somewhere down there, McKenna was trying to survive, and she had no idea that a stranger halfway across the country had just upended his entire world because of a mark on her wrist. His phone buzzed. Nora's name lit up the screen. He answered before the second ring. Tell me you found something. We have something on McKenna, she said, voice tight with urgency. Leighton's pulse spiked. What? She's staying at a women's shelter on the south side. One of our investigators tracked her through the news station. She's been there for 3 weeks. He grabbed his coat. Send me the address. Sir, it's 4 a.m. You should wait until, send it. Now. The line went quiet for a second. Then Nora sighed. It's already in your email. But Leighton, be careful. You don't know this woman. You don't know what you're walking into. I know enough, he said. He hung up and pulled up the address. 15 minutes away. He could be there in 10 if the streets stayed empty. But as he headed for the door, something stopped him. What was he going to say to her? Hi, I'm a billionaire who saw you on TV and flew across the country because we have the same mark on our wrists. Want to take a DNA test? He sounded insane. But the alternative, going back to New York, pretending he never saw her, living the rest of his life with that question burning in his chest, was worse than insane. It was unbearable. He grabbed his keys and walked out into the hallway. The hotel was silent. His footsteps echoed off the marble floors. The elevator doors slid open, and he stepped inside, watching his reflection in the mirrored walls. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. A man chasing ghosts. Maybe he was. But if there was even a chance, even the smallest, most impossible chance that McKenna Soleil knew something about where he came from, then he had to take it. The elevator doors opened. He stepped into the lobby and pushed through the glass doors into the cold morning air. The city was waking up. Early buses rumbled past. A few people shuffled down the sidewalk, heads down, lost in their own worlds. Leighton climbed into the SUV and gave the driver the address. As they pulled away from the curb, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Nora. One more thing. McKenna was born at Street Mercy General 2. Same hospital. Same year. Same fire. His chest tightened. Same hospital. Same fire. Same mark. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. This was fate. And in less than 10 minutes, he was about to come face to face with the only person in the world who might be able to tell him who he really was. 3 days earlier, McKenna stood on the same corner, holding the same sign, pretending the cold didn't hurt. Her fingers were numb. Her feet ached. The wind cut through her thin jacket like it had a personal grudge. But she didn't sit down. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stood there. The cardboard sign felt heavier than it should. Former nanny. Lost my job defending a child. Need work. Anything helps. People walked past without looking. Some glanced, then looked away fast, like poverty was contagious. A few dropped coins into the cup at her feet. One man spit on the ground near her shoes. She didn't flinch. She'd learned a long time ago that the world didn't reward kindness. It punished it, and she was living proof. 6 months ago, she had a job, a roof, a future. She took care of 3 kids like they were her own, made them breakfast, helped with homework, tucked them in at night. She loved them, and she thought their parents trusted her. Until the night, little Lily got sick. Fever spiking, breathing fast, crying in pain. McKenna called the parents, begged them to come home. They told her to give Lily some medicine and wait. But McKenna had seen that look before. The glassy eyes, the shallow breaths. She knew waiting could mean losing her. So she wrapped Lily in a blanket, strapped her into the car, and drove straight to the emergency room. The doctors said she'd saved the little girl's life. The parents said she'd crossed the line. They fired her the next morning, called her unstable, dramatic, untrustworthy. And then they made sure every family in their circle knew it too. No references, no second chances, no mercy. Makena had knocked on 50 doors, applied to 100 jobs, sent out emails, made phone calls, begged for interviews. Nothing. And now here she was, standing on a street corner, holding a sign that felt like a confession. A bus pulled up. Passengers filed off, heads down, eyes locked on their phones. She lifted the sign higher, just in case. Just in case one person decided today was the day they'd care. Nobody stopped. The bus pulled away, leaving her alone again. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying to keep the blood flowing. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. The shelter served dinner at 6, but it was only 3 now. 3 more hours of standing. 3 more hours of being invisible. Then she saw the van. White. Logo on the side. Channel 7 News. Her heart dropped. A young woman stepped out. Camera crew behind her. She had kind eyes and a soft smile. The kind that made you want to trust her even when you knew better. She walked straight toward Makena. "Hi," the woman said gently. "I'm Maya. I'm a reporter with Channel 7. I've seen you out here a few times." Makena's guard went up. "I'm not doing anything illegal." "I know," Maya said quickly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I think people need to hear your story. Would you be willing to share it?" Makena stared at her. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. What if this made things worse? What if the family that fired her saw it? What if nobody cared anyway? But then she thought about Lily. About all the other kids out there being raised by people who saw them as paychecks instead of children? About all the nannies like her, invisible, underpaid, disposable? Someone had to say it. Why not her? She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll talk." Maya's face lit up. She motioned to the crew, and they started setting up. Lights, microphone, camera. Makena's hands shook as she lowered the sign. She glanced down at her wrist, at the faded mark she'd carried since birth. Her mother used to trace it with her finger when Makena was little, telling her it was a reminder that she was special, that she was chosen, that she survived. Right now, it just felt like another scar. The camera light blinked red. Maya held up the microphone. "Whenever you're ready," she said softly. Makena took a breath, and for the first time in months, she let herself be seen. "What happened?" Maya asked, her voice soft but steady. Makena swallowed hard. The camera's red light blinked at her like a warning, but she'd already said yes. There was no turning back now. "I was a full-time nanny for 3 years," she began, her voice shaking just a little. "I took care of 3 kids, cooked their meals, helped with homework, tucked them in every night. I loved them like they were mine." Maya nodded, encouraging her to continue. "One night, the youngest Lily, she got really sick. High fever. Her breathing was off. I could see it in her chest, the way she was struggling." Makena's hands tightened around the basing sign. "I called her parents, begged them to come home. They were at some dinner party. They told me to give her medicine and wait." "But you didn't wait," Maya said gently. Makena shook her head. "I couldn't. I've seen kids go downhill fast. I knew if I waited, she might not make it. So I wrapped her in a blanket and drove her to the emergency room myself." "And what did the doctors say?" "They said another hour or 2, and she might have died." Makena's voice cracked. "They said I did the right thing." Maya's eyes softened. "So you saved her life?" "Yeah." Makena let out a bitter laugh. "And the next morning, her parents fired me." The words hung in the air like smoke. "They said I overreacted, that I was dramatic, unstable. They told everyone they knew not to hire me, said I couldn't be trusted." She looked down at her feet. "After that, no one would even give me an interview. It didn't matter that I'd worked for years without a problem. Didn't matter that I'd saved their daughter. All that mattered was what they said about me. She did the right thing and lost everything. How many people like her go unseen every day?" Maya's jaw tightened. Do you regret it? Taking her to the hospital? McKenna looked up, meeting the camera's lens head-on. No, I'd do it again. That little girl is alive because I didn't wait for permission to care. If that makes me unstable, then so be it. Her voice was steady now, strong, the kind of strength that comes from losing everything and still standing. Maya paused, then asked, "Do you have any family? Anyone helping you?" McKenna's face softened, just for a second. "My mom passed 2 years ago. It's just me now." "I'm sorry," Maya said quietly. McKenna nodded, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. "She used to tell me that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good, but you do it anyway, because someone has to." The wind picked up, pulling at McKenna's coat. She shifted the sign in her hands, and her sleeve slipped back. Just for a second. But it was enough. The cameraman saw it first. He zoomed in slowly, focusing on her left wrist, on the faded, crooked mark that sat just below her palm. A crescent, a broken line, uneven edges. It looked like a stamp that had been pressed too hard and left to fade over time. Maya noticed the cameraman's shift. She glanced down at McKenna's wrist, then back at her face. "That mark," she said carefully. "What is it?" McKenna looked down, almost surprised to see it exposed. She pulled her sleeve back over it quickly. "It's nothing. Just something from when I was born. The hospital used ink stamps because their machines were down. My mom said there was a fire. Records got lost. This was how they kept track of babies." Maya's expression changed. Curiosity flickered in her eyes. "Which hospital?" "Street Mercy General," McKenna answered. "It closed down years ago." The cameraman kept filming. The lens stayed locked on her wrist, even though she'd covered it again. Maya opened her mouth to ask another question, but McKenna shook her head. "That's all I want to say. I just want people to know I'm not looking for pity. I'm looking for work. I'm good at what I do. I care. And I got punished for it." Her voice was firm, final. Maya nodded slowly. "Thank you for sharing your story, McKenna. I think a lot of people need to hear it." The camera light went off. The crew started packing up. Maya shook McKenna's hand, gave her a card, and promised to stay in touch. McKenna stood there for a long moment after they left, staring at the empty street. She didn't know it yet, but in a few hours, her story would air on the evening news. Thousands of people would see her face, her sign, her wrist. And one of those people, a man sitting in a glass tower hundreds of miles away, would drop his fork, freeze in place, and stare at her wrist like he'd just seen a ghost. Because he had the exact same mark, and his entire world was about to change. Nora burst through the hotel room door without knocking. Leighton was standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, jaw tight. He turned sharply. "I said I'd call you back. Sir, you need to see this." She was breathless, holding a folder like it was evidence in a murder trial. He ended the call without another word. "What is it?" She walked to the desk and spread out the papers. Police reports, hospital records, news clippings from 30 years ago, all of them stamped with the same name. Street Mercy General Hospital. Leighton's pulse quickened. "Where did you get this?" "I had our team pull everything they could find on McKenna Soleil. Birth records, employment history, family background." Nora tapped one of the documents. "She was born at Street Mercy General. Same hospital as you." He stepped closer, eyes scanning the page. "When?" "Same year, same month, same week as you, actually." She pulled out another sheet. "And look at this." It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed and cracked at the edges. The headline read, "Fire at St. Mercy. General destroys records, wing dozens of newborns affected." Leighton's hands trembled as he picked it up. The article described chaos, power outages, understaffed units, a fire that started in the records room and spread fast. By the time it was contained, years of birth certificates, adoption papers, and medical files were gone. "They used temporary ink stamps," Nora said quietly, "to identify babies when the computers went down. It was supposed to be a short-term fix until they could restore the records. But the fire made that impossible." Leighton stared at the article, his mind racing. So, the mark on my wrist, it wasn't unique to you, Nora finished. There were others, maybe dozens, all stamped with the same system, all lost in the same mess. He looked up at her, something fierce and desperate burning in his eyes. And McKenna was one of them. It looks that way. She hesitated. But sir, this doesn't mean you're related. It just means you were both caught up in the same disaster. I know. He set the clipping down carefully, like it might crumble if he gripped it too hard. But it's not a coincidence anymore, is it? Nora shook her head slowly. No, it's not. Leighton turned back to the window, staring out at the city below. Somewhere down there, McKenna was waking up in a shelter, probably still wondering why a news crew had cared enough to listen to her story. She had no idea that her story was about to collide with his. "Book me a car," he said suddenly. "To where?" "The shelter. I'm going to see her." Nora's eyes widened. "Sir, you can't just show up unannounced. You'll scare her. She doesn't know who you are." "I don't care." He grabbed his coat. "I've spent my entire life not knowing where I came from. And now there's a woman out there who might have answers. I'm not waiting another day." "But what are you going to say to her?" Nora asked, stepping in front of him. "You can't just walk up and say, 'Hey, we have the same birthmark. Want to take a DNA test?' She'll think you're insane." Leighton stopped. His jaw clenched. He didn't have an answer. Because what do you say to a stranger who might be the only person in the world who understands the one part of you that's never made sense? "I don't know yet," he admitted quietly. "But I'll figure it out when I see her." Nora studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed and stepped aside. "The car will be downstairs in 5 minutes." He nodded and headed for the door. But before he left, he turned back one last time. "Nora, what if she is family? What if all this time I had someone out there and I just didn't know?" Nora's expression softened. "Then you'll finally have your answer." He walked out into the hallway, heart pounding harder than it had in years. Downstairs, the black SUV was waiting. The driver opened the door, and Leighton slid into the back seat, clutching the folder Nora had given him. As the car pulled away from the hotel, he stared down at the newspaper clipping again, at the grainy photo of Street Mercy General engulfed in smoke, at the caption beneath it, "Hospital officials say it may take years to restore lost records. If ever, years." It had been more than 30, and in all that time, no one had come looking for him. No one had claimed him. No one had cared enough to dig through the ashes and find out what happened to the babies who got stamped and forgotten. But now, he was going to do what no one else had. He was going to find the truth, even if it broke him. The car turned onto a narrow street lined with old buildings and chain-link fences. The shelter was at the end of the block, a plain brick building with bars on the windows, and a crooked sign that read, "Safe Haven Women's Shelter." The driver pulled up to the curb. "We're here, sir." Leighton didn't move. His hand hovered over the door handle. On the other side of that door was a woman who had no idea her life was about to change, and neither did he. Leighton stood across the street, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, watching. The shelter's front door opened, and she stepped out. McKenna. She wore the same thin jacket from the news segment, hair pulled back tight, shoulders squared like she was bracing for battle. She walked with purpose, head up. Even though her shoes were worn and her jeans had a tear at the knee, she didn't look defeated. She looked like someone who refused to break. Leighton's chest tightened. He'd seen her on TV, seen the mark on her wrist, but standing here, watching her in real life, was different. She wasn't just a mystery anymore. She was a person. A woman who'd been thrown away for doing the right thing. A woman who kept standing even when the world told her to fall. She stopped at the corner, waiting for the light to change. A man walked past her, close enough to bump her shoulder. He didn't apologize, just kept walking. McKenna didn't react. She adjusted the strap of her bag and kept her eyes forward. The light turned green. She crossed the street, heading toward the bus stop. Leighton took a step forward, then stopped. What was he doing? He didn't know this woman. Didn't know if she'd even want to talk to him. Didn't know if showing up like this would help or just make everything worse, but his feet moved anyway. One step, then another. The distance between them closed with every breath. She sat down on the bench at the bus stop, pulling her jacket tighter against the wind. She stared down at her hands, turning them over slowly. That's when Leighton saw it again. The mark. Faded. Crooked. Identical to his own. His heart pounded so hard he thought she might hear it. He was 10 feet away now. She looked up. Their eyes met. For a second, neither of them moved. She studied him with the kind of caution that comes from living on the street. Quick assessment. Instant judgment. He wasn't a threat, but he wasn't familiar either. Just another stranger in a city full of them. "Can I help you?" she asked. Voice calm but guarded. Leighton opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "What do you say?" "Hi, I saw you on TV and I think we might be connected because we have the same birthmark from a hospital fire 30 years ago." It sounded insane in his head. It would sound worse out loud, but he'd come this far. "I saw you on the news," he said finally, voice steadier than he felt. "The interview with the reporter." Her expression shifted. Not quite suspicion, but close. "Okay, and I wanted to talk to you," he continued. "About what you said, about the hospital, the mark on your wrist." Her guard went up instantly. She pulled her sleeve down, covering her wrist. "What about it?" He hesitated. Then slowly, carefully, he turned his own wrist upward. The mark showed crooked crescent, broken line, faded edges. Identical. McKenna's eyes widened. She stared at his wrist, then back at his face, then down at his wrist again. Her breath caught. "What?" She stood up, taking a step back. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" "No," Leighton said quickly, holding his hands up. "I swear, this isn't a joke. I've had this my whole life. I was born at Street Mercy General. There was a fire. They used ink stamps because the computers were down. My adoptive mother told me before she died." McKenna's face went pale. That's my story." "I know." His voice was quiet now, almost pleading. "That's why I had to find you." She shook her head, backing up another step. No, this doesn't make sense. You're not." "I'm not what?" he asked gently. "You're not like me," she whispered, eyes scanning his expensive coat, his clean shoes, the way he carried himself like someone who'd never had to wonder where his next meal was coming from. "I know," he said, "but that doesn't change what's on our wrists." She looked down at her own arm, pulling the sleeve back just enough to see the mark again. Her hands were shaking. "Who are you?" she asked, voice barely above. A whisper. "My name is Leighton Ward," he said, "and I think we might be family." The word hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Family. McKenna's knees almost gave out. She grabbed the bench to steady herself, eyes locked on his. "You think we're... what? Siblings?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But we were both born at the same hospital. Same fire. Same mark. I don't believe in coincidences that big." She stared at him for a long, breathless moment. Then her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I've been alone my whole life," she said, voice breaking. "My mom died 2 years ago. I don't have anyone. And now you're telling me..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Leighton took a step closer. "I know this is a lot. I know it sounds crazy, but if there's even a chance we're connected, don't you want to know?" She looked at him. Really looked at him. At the desperation in his eyes that mirrored her own. "How do we find out?" she whispered. "DNA test," he said. Simple, fast, definitive. She nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. "And if we are? If we're really? Then we don't let each other go," he said firmly. "Not again." A tear finally slipped down her cheek, and for the first time in years, McKenna felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. They stood face to face on a crowded sidewalk, wrists held up between them like evidence in a trial. People walked past, rushing to work, scrolling through phones, living their ordinary lives. None of them stopped. None of them noticed the two strangers staring at matching scars that shouldn't exist. McKenna's hand trembled as she held her wrist closer to his. It's exactly the same. Leighton nodded slowly, throat tight. Down to the angle, the shape, even the way it fades at the edges. She pulled her hand back, wrapping her arms around herself like she needed to hold something together before it fell apart. This can't be real. It is, he said quietly. But how? Her voice cracked. How does a billionaire end up with the same hospital mistake as a nanny who can't even afford rent? The question hung heavy between them. Leighton didn't have an answer. Not yet. But he could see the walls going up in her eyes. The instinct to protect herself from hope that might turn into another disappointment. Let me buy you coffee, he said gently. Somewhere quiet. We can talk. She hesitated, eyes darting toward the bus stop. I have a job interview in 2 hours. I'll get you there on time, he promised. I just need 30 minutes. Please. McKenna studied his face, searching for lies, for tricks, for the catch that always came when something seemed too good to be true. But all she saw was desperation that looked a lot like her own. 30 minutes, she said finally. That's it. They walked 3 blocks to a small coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The kind of place where nobody cared who you were or why you were there. Leighton ordered 2 coffees and a plate of pastries. McKenna sat by the window, staring out at the street, still trying to process what was happening. He set the coffee in front of her and sat down across the small table. I know this is overwhelming. Overwhelming? She let out a sharp laugh. I thought my life couldn't get any stranger. Then a man in a $1,000 coat shows up and tells me we might be related because of a mark I've had since birth. Imagine meeting a stranger and realizing your whole life might have been a lie. Would you walk away? Leighton leaned forward, elbows on the table. I've spent my entire life wondering where I came from. My adoptive parents loved me, gave me everything, but they couldn't give me answers. And when they died, those answers died with them. McKenna's expression softened just a little. I had one clue, he continued, lifting his wrist. This. My mother told me it was from a hospital fire, that records were destroyed, that I had no family. I believed her because I had no reason not to. Until you saw me on TV, McKenna finished. Until I saw you, he confirmed. And everything I thought I knew about myself became a question mark. She wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, letting the heat seep into her fingers. My mom told me the same story. Fire, lost records, ink stamp. She said the hospital was a mess that night. Too many babies, not enough staff. They used the stamps so babies wouldn't get mixed up. Street? Mercy General, Leighton said. Street? Mercy General, she echoed. They sat in silence for a moment, both staring at their wrists like the marks might suddenly start talking and explain everything. What if we're not related? McKenna asked quietly. What if this is just some weird coincidence and we get our hopes up for nothing? Then we'll know, Leighton said. And at least we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering. She looked up at him, eyes glassy with unshed tears. And what if we are? What if we're really? She couldn't say the word. Siblings. Leighton finished for her. The word landed like a stone in deep water. McKenna's breath hitched. I've been alone for 2 years. Before that, it was just me and my mom. I've never had a brother, a sister. Anyone? Neither have I, Leighton said, voice thick with emotion. I built an empire, hired hundreds of people, surrounded myself with staff and assistants and business partners. But at the end of the day, I go home to an empty penthouse and eat dinner alone. Their eyes met across the table. 2 strangers, 2 different worlds, 1 impossible connection. So what do we do? McKenna whispered. Leighton pulled a business card from his wallet and slid it across the table. There's a lab downtown. They do DNA testing. Fast. Confidential. We can go today if you want. She stared at the card like it was a loaded gun. I'll pay for everything, he added quickly. This isn't about money. It's about answers. McKenna picked up the card, fingers shaking. And if the test says we're family? Leighton's jaw tightened. Then we don't let each other go. Not again. Not ever. She looked at him for a long, breathless moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Relief flooded Leighton's face. Really? Really? She tucked the card into her pocket. But I need to know something first. Anything. If we're not related, she said slowly, will you still help me? Or will you disappear like everyone else? The question cut deeper than she probably meant it to. Leighton leaned back, holding her gaze. I didn't fly across the country just to walk away, McKenna. No matter what that test says, you're not alone anymore. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but not before he saw it. Okay, she whispered. Let's find out the truth. And for the first time in both their lives, the possibility of family felt real. Tell me about your life, Leighton said, breaking the silence that had settled between them. McKenna looked up from her coffee, surprised. Why? Because if we're going to take a DNA test together, I should know more about you than just your name and a news segment. She hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. There's not much to tell. I doubt that. She studied him for a moment, then sighed. Fine, but you go first. You're the billionaire. I'm sure your story's more interesting. Leighton shook his head. My story's boring. Money, buildings, contracts, meetings that could have been emails. He paused. But the part that matters? The part that kept me up at night? That's the same as yours. What part? Not knowing where I came from. McKenna's guard dropped just a little. She set her cup down. My mom worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, cleaning houses during the day, waitressing at night. She never complained, never made me feel like I was a burden, even though I know I was. You weren't a burden, Leighton said quietly. You didn't know her, McKenna replied. She could barely pay rent, but she always made sure I had what I needed. Books, school supplies, a safe place to sleep. Her voice softened. She died 2 years ago. Stroke. Went to work one morning and never came home. Leighton's chest tightened. I'm sorry. McKenna nodded, swallowing hard. After that, it was just me. I threw myself into work, took care of other people's kids because I didn't have any family of my own, and for a while, that was enough. Until it wasn't, Leighton finished. Until I saved a little girl's life and got punished for it. She laughed bitterly. That's when I realized something. It doesn't matter how hard you work or how much you care. If you don't have money or power or the right last name, you're disposable. The words hung heavy in the air. Leighton leaned back, jaw tight. You're not disposable. Easy for you to say, she shot back. You probably haven't worried about money a day in your life. You're right, he admitted. I haven't. But that doesn't mean I haven't felt disposable. She frowned. How? My adoptive parents loved me, he said slowly. But there was always this distance, like they were waiting for me to ask the question they didn't want to answer. When my dad died, he didn't leave a letter, didn't say goodbye, just gone. And my mom? She waited until she was dying to tell me the truth about where I came from. He looked down at his wrist. I spent my whole life building something so big, so solid, that no one could take it away from me. But it didn't fill the hole. McKenna's expression softened. What hole? The one that comes from not knowing who you really are, he said quietly. I have everything, but I don't have a single person who shares my blood, who looks like me, who understands what it's like to grow up wondering if you were a mistake. McKenna's breath caught. You think you were a mistake? Don't you? He asked, eyes meeting hers. She didn't answer right away. But the silence said everything. Yeah, she whispered finally. I do. They sat there for a moment, 2 people from completely different worlds, realizing they'd been carrying the same weight their entire lives. What if we're wrong? McKenna asked suddenly. What if we take the test and find out we're not related? What if this whole thing is just nothing? Leighton reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Then it's still not nothing, because right now, in this moment, you're the only person in the world who understands what I've been feeling my whole life. Her eyes filled with tears again. I don't know if I can handle being disappointed again. Then we won't be disappointed, he said firmly. No matter what that test says, we're not walking away from each other. Deal? She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. but all she saw was certainty. "Deal," she whispered. Leighton squeezed her hand gently, then let go. "The lab opens at noon. We can go after." "Your interview?" McKenna blinked. "My interview? I almost forgot." He glanced at his watch. "You have 45 minutes. Where is it?" "Across town. I was going to take the bus." "I'll drive you," he said, standing up. "You don't have to." "McKenna," he interrupted gently. "Let me help. Please." She looked up at him, overwhelmed by the kindness in his voice. The kind of kindness she hadn't heard in a long time. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." They walked out of the coffee shop together, side by side. The sun was breaking through the clouds now, warming the cold morning air. As they reached the black SUV waiting at the curb, McKenna stopped. "Leighton?" He turned. "Yeah, if we are family," she said slowly. "What happens next?" He smiled, but it was sad. "Then we don't let each other go." "Not again," she nodded, heart pounding, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving, she was hoping. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. The lab was sterile and quiet, the kind of place where answers lived behind locked doors and white coats. McKenna sat in the waiting room, knee bouncing, hands folded tight in her lap. Leighton sat beside her, perfectly still, but his jaw was clenched so hard she thought he might crack a tooth. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "No," he admitted. "You? Not even a little." A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. McKenna Soleil and Leighton Ward? They both stood at the same time. The nurse smiled warmly. "Right this way." They followed her down a narrow hallway lined with exam rooms. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Everything felt too bright, too clean, too final. The nurse led them into a small room with 2 chairs and a table. "The test is simple," she explained. "We'll take a cheek swab from each of you. Results usually take 3 to 5 business days, but we can expedite for an additional fee." "Expedited," Leighton said immediately. "How fast?" McKenna asked. 48 hours, the nurse replied. McKenna's stomach dropped. 2 days. 2 days of waiting. 2 days of wondering if her entire life was about to change. Waiting for answers you've needed your whole life is torture. If you've ever felt that kind of uncertainty, you know why this matters. The nurse opened 2 sterile packages and pulled out cotton swabs. "Open wide, please." McKenna went first. The swab brushed the inside of her cheek, quick and painless. But it felt like everything, like her past, present, and future, were being scraped away and sealed in a plastic tube. Then it was Leighton's turn. He opened his mouth, and the nurse repeated the process. She labeled both tubes carefully, double-checking the names. "All set," she said with a kind smile. "We'll call you as soon as the results are in." "That's it?" McKenna asked, voice shaky. "That's it." It felt too easy, too fast. Like something this important should have taken longer, hurt more, meant something bigger than a cotton swab and a plastic tube. They walked out of the lab in silence. The sun was too bright. The world felt too loud. Leighton stopped on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets. "What do we do now?" McKenna let out a shaky laugh. "I have no idea. Do you want to grab lunch?" he asked. "Or, I don't know, do something normal while we wait?" She looked at him, really looked at him. "Nothing about this is normal." "I know," he smiled faintly. "But maybe pretending will help." She thought about it. About going back to the shelter and sitting in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last 24 hours. About waiting alone. "Okay," she said. "Let's pretend." They found a small diner a few blocks away. The kind with checkered floors and vinyl booths, and a jukebox in the corner that didn't work anymore. They ordered burgers and fries and milkshakes, and for a little while, they talked about everything except the test. McKenna told him about the kids she used to take care of, about bedtime stories and scraped knees, and the way Lily used to call her Kina because she couldn't say the full name yet. Leighton told her about his company, about late nights in boardrooms and deals that felt important at the time but didn't mean much now, about the penthouse that echoed when he walked through it. "It sounds lonely," McKenna said softly. "It is," he admitted. I thought success would fill it, but it just made the silence louder. She nodded slowly. I thought love would fill mine. Taking care of kids, being needed. But when they took that away, I realized I was still empty. They looked at each other across the table. Two people who'd spent their whole lives trying to fill holes that couldn't be filled with work, or money, or even love. What if the test says we're not related? McKenna asked suddenly. Leighton set down his milkshake. Then we're still not alone. But it won't be the same. No, he agreed. But it'll still matter. She wanted to believe him. But belief felt dangerous right now. They finished their meal in comfortable silence. Leighton paid the bill, and they walked back to the SUV. He drove her to the shelter, parking a block away so she wouldn't have to explain who he was. Thank you, she said. Hand on the door handle. For everything. Don't thank me yet, he said. We haven't gotten the results. Still, she looked at him, eyes glassy. No one's ever done something like this for me. Get used to it, he said quietly. She smiled, just a little, and stepped out of the car. As she walked toward the shelter, Leighton watched her disappear through the doors. His phone buzzed. A text from Nora. How did it go? He typed back. We took the test. Now, we wait. Another buzz. And if you're not related? He stared at the question for a long moment. Then he typed, then I'll help her anyway. Because somewhere between the coffee shop and the lab and the diner, McKenna Soleil had stopped being a mystery. She'd become someone he couldn't walk away from, family or not. 2 days later, Leighton's phone rang at 6 a.m. Unknown number. He answered on the first ring. Hello, Mr. Ward. This is Glenwood Labs. Your results are ready. His heart stopped. Both of you need to come in to review them. The voice continued. Can you be here by 9? Yes, he said, already moving. We'll be there. He hung up and immediately called McKenna. She answered on the third ring, voice groggy. Hello, they called, he said. The results are in. There was a long, breathless pause. Then her voice, barely a whisper. Oh God, I'm picking you up in 30 minutes, he said. We're doing this together. Okay, she breathed. Okay. He hung up and stared at his reflection in the hotel mirror. In 3 hours, he would know the truth, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first night after the test, McKenna couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk at the shelter, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the sounds of women breathing, snoring, crying softly in their sleep. Her phone sat on the thin mattress beside her, screen dark, silent, waiting. She kept replaying the moment in the lab, the swab, the tubes, the nurse's kind smile that felt like pity, and Leighton sitting beside her, just as scared as she was, even though he'd never admit it. At 11:30, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It's Leighton. Couldn't sleep. You? She stared at the screen, heart racing. Then typed back, not even close. His response came fast. Want to talk? She hesitated. Then, yeah. Her phone rang seconds later. Hey, he said, voice low and rough. Hey, she whispered back, sitting up carefully so she wouldn't wake anyone. I know this is weird, he said, calling you in the middle of the night, but I couldn't just lie there and pretend I wasn't thinking about it. Me neither. She pulled her knees to her chest. What if we're wrong? What if this whole thing is just some crazy coincidence? Then we'll deal with it, he said quietly. But McKenna, what if we're right? The question hung in the air like smoke. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she admitted. Neither am I, he said. But we're doing it anyway. She smiled in the dark. You're kind of stubborn, you know that? So are you. They talked for an hour. About nothing. About everything. About what it felt like to grow up feeling like you didn't belong anywhere. About the emptiness that came from not knowing where you came from. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if the fire never happened? McKenna asked. All the time, Leighton said. But then I wonder if I'd be better off. Or worse. Or just different. Different doesn't sound so bad, she murmured. No, he agreed. It doesn't. When they finally hung up, McKenna felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Connected. The second night was worse. Leighton paced his hotel room, phone in hand, checking it every 5 minutes, like the lab might call early. They wouldn't. He knew that. But logic didn't stop the anxiety crawling up his spine. At midnight, he called McKenna. She answered on the first ring. "You okay?" "No," he admitted. "You? Not even a little." He laughed softly. "At least we're consistent." "Leighton," she said quietly, "what happens if we're not related? Do you just go back to New York and forget this ever happened? Is that what you think?" he asked, hurt creeping into his voice. "I don't know what to think," she said. "You have a whole life waiting for you. Penthouse, company, people who need you. I'm just some woman you saw on TV." "Stop," he said firmly. "You're not just anything. And I'm not going anywhere. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." His voice softened. "Because for the first time in my life, I'm not alone in this. And I'm not giving that up. Test results or not." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Promise?" "Promise." They talked until 2 in the play. Morning. About childhood memories. About dreams they'd buried. About the people they'd lost and the scars they'd carried. "My mom used to say everything happens for a reason," McKenna said. "I never believed her. But now." "Now what?" "Now I'm starting to think maybe she was right." Leighton smiled. "Mine said the same thing. Think they knew something we didn't?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe they just wanted us to believe the pain meant something." "Does it?" McKenna asked. "Mean something?" "Ask me in 24 hours, he said. When they hung up, McKenna realized something. She wasn't just waiting for test results anymore. She was waiting to see if hope could survive disappointment. The third morning came too fast. McKenna woke up to her phone ringing. She grabbed it, heart pounding. Unknown number. "Hello? Miss Soleil, this is Glenwood Labs. Your results are ready." Her breath caught. "Already?" "Yes, ma'am. Both you and Mr. Ward need to come in to review them. Can you be here by 9? "Yes," she whispered. "We'll be there." She hung up, hands shaking. Then she called Leighton. He answered before the first ring finished. "Tell me," they called, she said, voice trembling. "The results are in." There was a long, heavy silence. Then his voice, steady and strong. "I'm on my way." 30 minutes later, Leighton pulled up outside the shelter. McKenna was already waiting on the curb, arms wrapped around herself, eyes red like she'd been crying. He stepped out of the SUV. "You okay?" "No," she said honestly. "Are you?" "Not even close." They stood there for a moment, staring at each other, both terrified of what the next hour would bring. "Whatever happens in there," Leighton said quietly, "we face it together." "Deal?" McKenna nodded, eyes glassy. "Deal." They climbed into the SUV. The driver pulled away from the curb. The city blurred past the windows. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The fear said everything. As they pulled up to the lab, McKenna reached over and grabbed Leighton's hand. He squeezed back, and together they walked through the doors. Ready or not, the truth was waiting. The doctor slid the paper across the desk like it was a verdict. McKenna stared at it, heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Leighton sat beside her, perfectly still, but his knuckles were white from gripping the armrest. "The results are conclusive," the doctor said gently. "You are not biologically related. You do not share parents. You are not siblings, half-siblings, or cousins. There is no genetic connection between you." The words landed like stones in deep water. McKenna's vision blurred. She blinked hard, trying to keep the tears back, but one slipped down her cheek anyway. Not related, not family, not anything. Leighton leaned forward, jaw tight. "Are you sure? The marks, the hospital, the fire, it all lines up." "I understand," the doctor said kindly. "But DNA doesn't lie. Whatever connection you share, it's not blood." McKenna stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "Thank you," she said, voice hollow. "We appreciate your time." She walked out before anyone could stop her. Leighton followed, catching up to her in the hallway. "McKenna, wait. I'm fine," she said, not looking at him. "No, you're not," She stopped, shoulders shaking. What do you want me to say, Leighton? That I'm disappointed? That I actually let myself believe we were family? That I'm an idiot for hoping? You're not an idiot, he said firmly. Then what am I? She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face now. Because right now, I feel like I just lost something I never even had. His chest tightened. I know. Do you? She challenged. Do you really? Because you still have your life, your money, your penthouse. I have nothing. And for 2 days, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had someone, but I don't. I never did. Sometimes the answers we get aren't the ones we wanted, but that doesn't mean the story ends. Share this, if you believe some connections go deeper than blood. Leighton stepped closer, voice low and steady. You're right. We're not related by blood. But that doesn't mean this is over. She wiped her eyes roughly. What are you talking about? The marks, he said. The hospital. The fire. None of that was a coincidence. We were both there, McKenna. Both stamped. Both told we had no family. And now we're supposed to believe it was just bad luck? What else could it be? She asked, voice breaking. I don't know, he admitted. But I'm not done looking, and neither should you. She stared at him, exhausted and heartbroken. Why do you care so much? Because you're the only person in the world who understands what it's like to grow up with a question mark where your history should be. His voice softened. And I'm not letting go of that just because some test says we're not related. Her breath hitched. So what do we do now? We find someone who was actually there, he said. Someone who saw what happened the night of the fire. Someone who can tell us the truth. You think there's someone still alive who remembers? She asked. There has to be. His eyes burned with determination. Nurses, doctors, social workers. Someone kept records, even if they were destroyed. Someone knows more than we've been told. McKenna looked down at her wrist, at the faded mark that had haunted her since childhood. What if we don't like what we find? Then at least we'll know, Leighton said, and we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering. She nodded slowly, wiping the last of her tears away. Okay, where do we start? Street Mercy General, he said. The hospital's been closed for years, but someone has to know what happened to the staff. We find them, we ask questions, and we don't stop until we get answers. They walked out of the lab together, side by side, the DNA results tucked away in Leighton's coat pocket like a lie they refused to believe. As they climbed into Enton, the SUV, McKenna's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You were on the news. I know what happened that night. We need to talk. Her heart stopped. She showed Leighton the screen. His eyes widened. Who is this? She scrolled down. Another message appeared. My name is Carla Ruiz. I was a nurse at Street Mercy General the night of the fire. I remember you both. McKenna's hands shook. Oh my God. Leighton grabbed the phone, reading the message over and over. She remembers us? Another text. Meet me tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. But be ready. The truth is worse than you think. McKenna and Leighton locked eyes. The DNA test said they weren't family. But someone out there knew why they had the same mark. And tomorrow, they were going to find out. The house was small, tucked at the end of a quiet street, where the trees grew thick and the neighbors kept to themselves. McKenna stood on the front porch, heart hammering, while Leighton knocked. Footsteps shuffled inside. Slow, hesitant. The door opened a crack, and a woman's face appeared older now. Lines etched deep around her eyes, gray hair pulled back in a loose bun, but her eyes were sharp, alert, haunted. Carla Ruiz? Leighton asked. The woman nodded slowly. You came. You said you remembered us, McKenna said, voice trembling. Carla's gaze shifted to McKenna's face, then down to her wrist. Even covered by her sleeve, Carla seemed to see it. Her breath caught. Oh my God, I knew this day would come. She stepped back, opening the door wider. Come in, quickly! They followed her inside. The house smelled like lavender and old paper. Photos lined the walls, family, grandchildren. A life lived long after the hospital closed. But there was something heavy in the air, something unfinished. Carla led them to a small living room and gestured to the couch. Sit, please. They sat. Carla lowered herself into an armchair across from them, hands folded tight in her lap like she was holding something together. I saw you on the news, she said, looking at McKenna. The interview. The moment I saw your face, I knew. And then I saw your wrist. Her voice broke. I've been carrying that night for 30 years. I thought I'd take it to my grave. What happened? Leighton asked, leaning forward. Carla closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. Street Mercy General was a nightmare that week. Understaffed. Overworked. The power kept going out. We had too many babies and not enough cribs. The system was broken, and we were all just trying to survive. The fire, McKenna whispered. The fire was the final blow, Carla said. But the chaos started before that. She looked at Leighton. You were brought in the day before, not by a mother, by a janitor who found you in the hospital chapel, wrapped in a blanket. No name, no paperwork, no one claiming you. Leighton's chest tightened. What do you mean, found? Someone left you there, Carla said gently. We never found out who. We stamped your wrist with baby C so we wouldn't lose track of you while we tried to figure out where you came from. We thought it was temporary. We thought someone would come back, but no one did, Leighton said quietly. Carla shook her head. No one did. She turned to McKenna. You were different. Your mother was there. She refused to leave your side. Checked your crib tag 10 times a night. We stamped you too, not because you were lost, but because the computers were down and she wouldn't let anyone near you without matching your wrist to your records. McKenna's throat tightened. My mom, she loved you fiercely, Carla said, eyes soft. When the fire started, she grabbed you and ran. We thought you both died in the smoke. It wasn't until weeks later that we found out she'd made it out. And Leighton? McKenna asked. Carla's face darkened. You were taken by emergency responders during the evacuation, handed to an adoption agency that same night. They said they were saving you. Maybe they were. But they also took your history, your answers, everything. Leighton's fists clenched. So I was just forgotten? Not forgotten, Carla said. Lost. There's a difference. She paused. There were dozens of babies stamped that week. Some went home with their families. Some got adopted. Some, we never knew what happened to them. So we're not the only ones, McKenna said slowly. No, Carla confirmed. You're two of many. But you're the only two who found each other. Silence settled over the room. Leighton stared at his wrist. Then the DNA test was right. We're not related. By blood, no, Carla said. But you're connected by something deeper. You were both victims of the same broken system, both marked by the same failure. Both told you had no one. But that was a lie, McKenna whispered. Carla's eyes filled with tears. It was the only lie we could tell. Because the truth that we lost track of babies, that records burned, that some children were just gone, was too ugly to admit. Leighton stood abruptly, pacing. So what do we do now? Accept that we were just collateral damage? No, Carla said firmly. You do what you're doing. You find the others. You tell the story. You make sure no one else gets lost the way you were. McKenna looked up at her. Are there more? Other babies with the same mark? Carla hesitated, then nodded. There might be. How many? Leighton demanded. I don't know, Carla admitted. The records burned. But if you're serious about finding them, I kept something. She stood slowly and walked to a drawer. She pulled out a worn notebook, pages yellowed and fragile. This is my personal log, she said. Names, dates, notes I wasn't supposed to keep. It's not complete, but it's a start. She handed it to Leighton. He opened it carefully, eyes scanning the handwritten entries. Baby names, timestamps, notes about families, adoptions, and question marks beside names that were never claimed. And there, near the bottom of one page, 2 entries side by side. Baby C, male, found in chapel, no family. Stamped 11/14. Baby Soleil, female, mother present. Stamped 11/15. McKenna leaned over his shoulder, tears streaming down her face. We were right next to each other. You were neighbors, Carla said softly. in the same chaos, under the same broken system. And somehow, 30 years later, you found each other again. Leighton looked up, voice thick. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Because I was ashamed, Carla whispered. Because I failed you. All of you. And I've lived with that guilt every single day since. McKenna stood and walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You didn't fail us. The system did. Carla broke down, sobbing quietly. Leighton closed the notebook carefully. Thank you for keeping this, for remembering. Carla wiped her eyes. What will you do now? Leighton and McKenna exchanged a look. We're going to find the others, McKenna said. And we're going to make sure their stories don't stay buried, Leighton added. As they walked out of the house, the notebook tucked under Leighton's arm, McKenna felt something shift inside her. They weren't siblings, but they were something. And whatever that was, it was just beginning. Tell us about that night, McKenna said, voice steady but barely holding together. The night of the fire. What really happened? Carla's hands trembled as she poured herself a glass of water. She took a long sip, then set it down carefully, like she was buying time before opening a wound that had never fully healed. Street mercy was drowning long before the fire, she began. Budget cuts, staff shortages, equipment breaking down every other day. The week you were both there, we had 23 babies in a unit built for 12. Nurses were working double shifts. Doctors were spread so thin they could barely keep up. She paused, eyes distant, lost in memory. The night before the fire, I was assigned to the infant ward. That's when they brought you in, Leighton. She looked at him, eyes filled with regret. A janitor found you in the chapel, wrapped in a hospital blanket. No note, no name, nothing. Leighton's jaw tightened. How does a baby just appear in a chapel? We asked the same question, Carla said. Security reviewed footage, but the cameras in that wing were broken. We questioned staff. No one saw anything. It was like you were just left there, on purpose. McKenna reached over and took Leighton's hand. He didn't pull away. We stamped your wrist, baby C, and put you in a crib, Carla continued. Planned to sort it out in the morning. But morning never came the way we expected. Because of the fire, McKenna whispered. Carla nodded. It started just after midnight. Electrical malfunction in the records room. Spread fast. Smoke filled the hallways. Alarms screaming. Babies crying. Staff running. It was chaos. Her voice cracked. Your mother, McKenna. She was incredible. While everyone else panicked, she ran. Straight to your crib, checked your wrist against your tag, and wrapped you in her arms like she'd die before she let you go. McKenna's eyes filled with tears. She saved me. She did, Carla confirmed. She ran through smoke, past flames, and didn't stop until she was outside. We thought she was a hero, and she was. But later, Carla hesitated. Later what? McKenna pressed. Later, she came back, Carla said quietly. Months after the fire, she asked about the other babies, the ones who didn't have mothers fighting for them. She wanted to know what happened to them. What did you tell her? Leighton asked. The truth, Carla said. That some were adopted, some went to foster care, some were lost in the system. We didn't have complete records anymore. The fire took everything. How many babies were lost in systems that failed them? If this story shakes you, it should. Don't let it be forgotten. And me? Leighton's voice was cold now. What happened to me? Carla's face crumpled. You were carried out by a firefighter, handed to emergency responders. They took you to a temporary shelter set up for displaced infants. An adoption agency stepped in the next day. They said they were helping. They said they were saving you. But they weren't, Leighton said flatly. They took you before we could verify anything, Carla admitted. Before we could check if anyone was looking for you. Before we could do our job. And by the time we realized what happened, you were gone. Gone where? Placed with a family, Carla said. A wealthy couple who'd been on a waiting list for years. They wanted a baby. You were available. It happened fast. Leighton stood abruptly, fists clenched. So I was just given away? Like I didn't matter? You mattered, Carla said, tears streaming down her face. But the system didn't care. It was broken. And you were just one of many who fell through the cracks. How many? McKenna demanded. How many babies were lost? Carla's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know the exact number, but there were at least 15 stamped that week. 15 babies marked because the system failed. Some found families, some didn't. And some, we just don't know. The room fell silent. Leighton turned to face her, eyes burning. Do you have their names? Carla nodded slowly. Some of them, in my notebook. But not all. Some entries are incomplete. Some are just question marks. We need to find them, McKenna said firmly. All of them. Why? Carla asked, confused. Because they deserve to know the truth, Leighton said. And because no one should grow up thinking they're alone when they're not. Carla stared at them, something like hope flickering in her tired eyes. You really think you can find them? We have to try, McKenna said. Carla reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Leighton. This is a list. Names I remember. Babies who were stamped. Some have addresses. Some don't. It's not much, but it's all I have. Leighton unfolded the paper carefully. 15 names. Some with notes. Some with nothing but a date and a question mark. One name stood out. Baby G, male, no family, stamped 11/16, adopted, unknown. Who is Baby G? Leighton asked. Carla's face went pale. I don't know. He was brought in the same night as the fire. No one knew where he came from. And then, he disappeared. Disappeared how? McKenna asked. Same as you, Leighton, Carla said. Taken by an agency, placed with a family. But no one kept records. No one followed up. He just vanished into the system. Leighton stared at the name, something cold settling in his chest. We're going to find him. And the others? McKenna added. Carla nodded, exhausted, but relieved. Then maybe we can finally make this right. As they stood to leave, Carla called after them. One more thing. They turned. Your mother, McKenna? Carla said quietly. She never stopped asking about the other babies, even years later. She felt guilty for saving you when others were left behind. McKenna's voice broke. She had nothing to feel guilty about. I know, Carla said, but she did anyway. And I think she'd be proud of what you're doing now. McKenna nodded, unable to speak. As they walked out into the fading afternoon light, Leighton held up the list. 15 names, 15 lives, 15 people who deserve answers. McKenna looked at him, eyes fierce. Then let's give them answers. And for the first time since the DNA results, they felt like they were doing exactly what they were meant to do. Not as siblings, but as survivors. Fighting for the ones who were lost. They sat in the SUV outside Carla's house. The list of names spread across Leighton's lap like a map to 15 broken stories. Neither of them spoke at first. The weight of what they'd just learned pressed down on them like gravity had doubled. Finally, McKenna broke the silence. So we're not siblings. No, Leighton said quietly. We're not. But we were both there. She continued, staring at her wrist. Same hospital, same chaos, same stamp, same failure. Leighton added bitterly. She looked at him. Is that all this is? Just bad luck? He turned the list over in his hands, eyes scanning the names again. Baby C, Baby Soleil, Baby G, 15 lives, marked by ink and tragedy. No, he said finally. It's not bad luck. It's proof that the system was broken. And we're the evidence. McKenna leaned back against the seat, exhausted. I wanted so badly for us to be family. I know, Leighton said. So did I. But we're not, she whispered. And I don't know what that makes us. He turned to face her, eyes serious. It makes us survivors. It makes us two people who refuse to let the past stay buried. And it makes us the only ones who can help the others. She blinked back tears. You really think we can find them? I don't know, he admitted. But I know we have to try. She nodded slowly, then glanced down at the list. Where do we even start? Leighton pointed to one of the names. Baby G. Carla said he disappeared into the system. If we can find him, maybe he knows something. Maybe he can help us find the others. And if he doesn't want to be found? McKenna asked. Then we respect that, Leighton said. But we at least give him the choice. No one gave us that. No one told us the truth. We had to dig it up ourselves. These people deserve better. McKenna studied his face. You've changed, you know. How? When I first met you, you were just some rich guy in a suit, she said. Now you're, I don't know, different. Like you found something you didn't know you were missing. He smiled faintly. I did. I found you. Her breath caught. Leighton, I'm not saying it the way it sounds, he said quickly. I just mean, for the first time in my life, I'm not alone in this. And that matters. More than the DNA test. More than anything. She looked down at her hands. Voice. Soft. It matters to me, too. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The kind that only comes when two people finally stop pretending they're okay. Carla said something that stuck with me, McKenna said. She said the mark wasn't a blood tie. It was a survival mark. She's right, Leighton said, lifting his wrist. This wasn't meant to connect us. It was meant to keep us from getting lost. But the system failed anyway. And yet, McKenna said, lifting her own wrist, it still brought us together. Their eyes met. Maybe that's the point, Leighton said quietly. Maybe the mark didn't fail. Maybe it just took 30 years to do what it was supposed to do. Which was what? McKenna asked. Help us find each other, he said, so we could fix what the system broke. She felt something shift inside her. A weight lifting. A purpose settling. So what now? She asked. Leighton folded the list carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket. Now we find Baby G. And then we find the play. Rest. One by one. No matter how long it takes. And what about us? McKenna asked. What are we now? He thought for a moment. Not siblings, not strangers. Something in between. Something new, she added. Yeah, he agreed. Something new. As the driver pulled away from the curb, McKenna glanced back at Carla's house. The old nurse stood in the window, watching them leave, one hand pressed against the glass. A silent goodbye. A silent apology. A silent hope that maybe, just maybe, the past could finally be put to rest. Do you think she'll be okay? McKenna asked. I think she will be now, Leighton said. She's been carrying this alone for 30 years. Now she doesn't have to. McKenna nodded, then pulled out her phone. I'm going to call the news station. The reporter who interviewed me. If we're going to find these people, we need help. Good idea, Leighton said. And I'll have my team start digging into adoption records, medical files, anything we can find. This is going to Carity. Take time, McKenna warned. I've got time, Leighton said. And I've got money. And for the first time in my life, I've got a reason to use both. She smiled. You're a good man, Leighton Ward. I'm trying to be, he said. As the city lights blurred past the window, McKenna looked down at the mark on her wrist. For so long, it had felt like a scar, a reminder of something broken, something lost. But now, it felt like something else. A badge, a symbol, a promise that no one would be forgotten. Not anymore. Leighton's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then froze. What is it? McKenna asked. He turned the phone toward her. An email. From an address they didn't recognize. The subject line read, I'm Baby G, and I've been looking for you too. McKenna's heart stopped. Leighton's hands shook as he opened the message. My name is Kai. I was born at Street Mercy General. I have the same mark. And I know things about that night that no one else does. We need to meet. Now. Leighton and McKenna locked eyes. He found us first, McKenna whispered. And he says he knows something, Leighton added. Do we trust him? She asked. Leighton stared at the message. We don't have a choice. He typed back, where and when. The response came instantly. Tomorrow. Midnight. The ruins of Street Mercy General. Come alone. McKenna's blood ran cold. That place has been abandoned for years. I know, Leighton said. Why would he want to meet there? I don't know. Leighton admitted. But if he has answers, we have to go. McKenna nodded, even though every instinct screamed danger. Because the truth was more important than fear. And tomorrow night, they were going to face it. In the place where it all began, the hotel room felt too quiet. McKenna stood by the window, staring out at the city lights, arms wrapped around herself. Leighton had insisted she stay somewhere safe until tomorrow night's meeting. He'd booked her a room in the same hotel, just down the hall from his. She wasn't used to this. Clean sheets, room service, safety. It felt like borrowed time. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Leighton standing there, still dressed, hair slightly messy like he'd been running his hands through it. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Not even close, she admitted. You? Same. She stepped aside. Come in. He walked in slowly, hands in his pockets, looking around the room like he was making sure she had everything she needed. You didn't have to do this, McKenna said quietly. The room, the food, all of it. I know, he said, but I wanted to. She sat on the edge of the bed, and he took the chair by the desk. For a moment, they just sat there, the weight of the day settling between them. We're not siblings, McKenna said, finally, voice soft. No, Leighton agreed. We're not. So what are we? She asked, looking up at him. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at her, really looked at her, like he was trying to figure out the same thing. I don't know, he admitted. But it's not nothing. It never felt like nothing, she said. Even before the DNA test, even when I thought we might be family, there was something. I felt it too, he said quietly. She looked down at her wrist, tracing the faded mark with her finger. I used to hate this. Thought it made me a mistake. A leftover. Something the world tried to throw away. And now? Leighton asked. Now I think it's a map, she said. A map that took years to read. And somehow, it led me to you. What if the person you needed most was never supposed to be family, but something more? If that thought hits you, others need to feel it too. Leighton's chest tightened. McKenna, I'm not saying this to make things weird, she said quickly. I need you to know that meeting you changed something. I went from thinking I was completely alone to realizing I wasn't. And that matters, even if we're not blood. He stood and walked over to her, sitting down on the brote bed beside her, close, but not touching. You're not alone, he said firmly, and you're never going to be again. I promise you that. She looked at him, eyes glassy. How can you promise that? You have a whole life in New York, a company, responsibilities. Stop, he interrupted gently. You're not just anything. You're the person who made me realize my life was empty. You're the reason I'm not sitting in a penthouse pretending I'm okay. You're the reason I finally care about something that isn't a contract or a deal. Her breath caught. Leighton, I don't know what we are, he said, but I know I don't want to walk away. Not now. Not ever. A tear slipped down her cheek. What if tomorrow changes everything? What if baby G knows something that makes all of this worse? Then we face it together, he said, like we've been doing. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I've never had someone who stayed. Everyone I've ever cared about either left or was taken from me. I don't know how to trust that you won't do the same. I'm not going anywhere, he said, voice steady and sure. I don't care what the DNA test says. I don't care what anyone else thinks. You matter to me, and I'm not losing you. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. Not a billionaire, not a stranger, not even a potential sibling, just a man who was just as lost as she was. And somehow, they'd found each other. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not giving up, she said. On me, on this, on all of it. He smiled faintly. You didn't give up either. They sat there in the quiet, shoulders almost touching, the space between them charged with something unspoken, something dangerous, something real. Finally, Leighton stood. I should let you get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Wait, she said, standing too. Can you Can you stay? Just for a little while? I don't want to be alone tonight. He hesitated, then nodded. Okay. They sat on the bed, side by side, backs against the headboard. McKenna turned on the TV. Some late-night rerun. Neither of them watched. They just sat there. Close enough to feel safe. Far enough to keep the lines from blurring. But as the hours passed, and McKenna's breathing slowed, her head tilted and rested gently against his shoulder. Leighton didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her trust. And for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to protect something more valuable than money. Hours later, McKenna woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. She was still on the bed, covered with a blanket she didn't remember pulling over herself. Leighton was gone, but there was a note on the nightstand. Went to grab coffee. Be back in 10. Don't go anywhere without me. She smiled, clutching the note like it was proof he was real. Then, her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. Her send. Stomach dropped. She opened it. McKenna, this is Kai. Change of plans. Meet me tonight at 11 p.m., not midnight. And come alone. If Leighton comes, I disappear. You'll never find the others. Her hands shook. She stared at the message, heart pounding. Kai wanted her alone. But why? Before she could think it through, the door opened. Leighton walked in with 2 coffees and a bag of pastries, smiling. Morning. How'd you sleep? She looked up at him, the message still glowing on her screen. And for the first time since they met, she didn't know if she should tell him the truth. Or protect him by lying. I need to tell you something, McKenna said, shoving her phone into her pocket before Leighton could see the screen. He set the coffees down on the table, brow furrowed. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. She forced a smile. Nothing. Just thinking about tonight. McKenna. He stepped closer, eyes searching hers. Don't lie to me. Not now. She wanted to tell him. Wanted to show him Kai's message and let him figure out what to do. But something about the way Kai had worded it, if Leighton comes, I disappear, made her hesitate. What if telling him ruined their only chance to find the others? I'm just scared, she said, which wasn't a lie. What if Kai doesn't show up? What if this is all a trap? Leighton's jaw tightened. Then we deal with it. Together. She nodded, guilt twisting in her stomach. Yeah, together. He studied her for a moment longer, then seemed to accept it. Come on, drink your coffee before it gets cold. We need to talk about something. She sat down on the bed, taking the cup he offered. What? He took a seat across from her, hands folded, expression serious. I've been thinking about what happens after tonight, after we meet Kai, after we find the others. What do you mean? She asked. We can't just find them and walk away, he said. These people, these 15 lives, they were all failed by the same system, just like we were. And I don't want to just uncover the truth and leave it at that. McKenna set her coffee down. What are you saying? I'm saying we do something about it, Leighton said, leaning forward. We start a foundation, something real, something that helps kids who fall through the cracks, nannies and caretakers who get punished for caring, families who can't afford to fight back. Her breath caught. A foundation? Yeah. His eyes burned with determination. We call it the Birthmark Foundation, not to honor the hospital that failed us, but to redeem the name, to turn something broken into something that actually helps people. McKenna stared at him, overwhelmed. Leighton, that's huge. I know, he said, but I can't do it alone. I have the money. I have the resources. But you have something I don't. What? You understand what it's like to be on the other side, he said quietly. You know what it feels like to be invisible, to be thrown away, to fight for someone, and lose everything because of it. I need that perspective. I need you. Her eyes filled with tears. You want me to run it with you? Yes, he said without hesitation. Equal partners, equal say, equal everything. She shook her head, disbelief flooding her face. I've never run anything but a household. I don't know how to manage a foundation. I don't know the first thing about. You know more than you think, Leighton interrupted. You know what real care looks like. You know what kids need. You know what it means to protect someone, even when it costs you everything. That's more valuable than any business degree. She looked down at her hands, overwhelmed. What if I mess it up? Then we fix it, he said. Together. No one's walking away this time, McKenna. Not from this. Not from each other. She looked up at him, tears spilling over. Why are you doing this? Because I spent my whole life building things that didn't matter, he said. Towers, contracts, deals, and none of it filled the emptiness. But this, helping people like us, that matters. And I want to do it with the one person who actually understands why. She wiped her eyes, voice shaking. I don't deserve this. Yes, you do, he said firmly. You deserve so much more than what life gave you. And I'm going to spend the rest of mine making sure you know that. She let out a choked laugh, half crying, half smiling. You're kind of intense, you know that? He smiled. So are you. They sat there for a moment, the weight of the decision settling between them. So what do you say? Leighton asked. Are you in? McKenna looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she'd never seen before. A future. Not one built on blood or DNA or family trees, but one built on purpose, on trust, on two broken people deciding to fix something together. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. Together. Leighton's face lit up. He stood and extended his hand. Partners? She stood too, taking his hand. Partners. They shook on it, and for the first time in her life, McKenna felt like she was building something that would last. But as they pulled apart, her phone buzzed again in her pocket. Another message from Kai. 11 p.m. Alone. Don't forget. Her smile faltered. You okay? Leighton asked, noticing the shift. She nodded quickly. Yeah. Just excited and nervous about everything. Me too, he said. But we're doing the right thing. She nodded again, forcing the guilt down, because she knew what she had to do. Tonight, she would meet Kai alone, and she would lie to the one person who'd never lied to her, because if it meant protecting him, if it meant finding the others, she would carry that weight, even if it broke her. Later that afternoon, they sat in a small cafe, sketching out plans for the foundation. Leighton talked about buildings, legal structures, funding. McKenna talked about programs, support systems, real care. It felt surreal, like they were building a dream out of ashes. But as the hours passed, McKenna's mind kept drifting back to the message. 11 p.m. Alone. She checked the time. 6 hours left. McKenna? Leighton's voice pulled her back. You sure you're okay? She looked up, forcing another smile. Yeah, just tired. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Get some rest before tonight. We need to be sharp. She nodded. You too. As they left the cafe, Leighton walked her back to her hotel room. He lingered at the door, like he didn't want to leave her alone. I'll see you at 11:30, he said. We'll head to Street Mercy together. Her stomach twisted. Yeah, see you then. He hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her forehead gently. Whatever happens tonight, we face it together. Remember that. She nodded, throat tight. I will. He walked down the hall, disappearing into his own room. McKenna closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Then she pulled out her phone and typed a message to Kai. I'll be there. Alone. The response came instantly. Good. Come to the East Wing, 2nd floor, room 214. And, McKenna, bring your wrist. You'll understand when you see it. She stared at the message, chills running down her spine. Room 214, the place where it all began. And tonight, she was walking back into it, alone. 6 months later, McKenna stood in the middle of an empty building, clipboard in hand, staring at walls that had once been covered in graffiti and broken dreams. Now they were blank canvases, waiting to be filled with hope. This is it? Leighton's voice echoed through the hollow space as he walked in behind her, hands in his pockets. This is it, McKenna confirmed, turning to face him. 3 floors, 12 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, a playroom, office space for social workers, and enough room to expand if we need to. He looked around, taking it all in. It's perfect. It's a mess, she corrected with a small smile. But it will be perfect. After their meeting with Kai that night, meeting that had changed everything, they decided to move forward with the foundation immediately. No more waiting, no more excuses. Kai had helped them find 3 of the 15 names on Carla's list. 3 people who'd been stamped, lost, and forgotten. And each one had a story that broke McKenna's heart all over again. But they also had something else: strength, resilience, a refusal to stay invisible. And now, they were going to make sure no one else had to fight that battle alone. So what's first? Leighton asked, walking over to stand beside her. Beds, McKenna said. Warm ones, not cots or thin mats. Real beds where kids can feel safe. Done, he said. What else? A playroom, she continued, with books and games and toys. Kids need to feel like kids, not problems. I'll have it fully stocked by the end of the week, he promised. She turned to him, eyes soft. You know you don't have to do everything, right? This is supposed to be a partnership. I know, he said, but you're the heart of this place. I'm just the wallet. You're more than that, she said quietly. You're the reason this exists. He smiled. No, you're the reason. I just had the means. You had the vision. Real change starts when someone stops scrolling and starts caring. If you've been moved by this, imagine what sharing it could do. The first night they opened, only 3 kids came. A boy whose mother was in rehab, trying to get clean. 2 sisters who'd been living in their aunt's car for weeks. All of them scared. All of them guarded. All of them expecting to be turned away. McKenna knelt down in front of them, looking each one in the eye. You're safe here. You're not a burden. You're wanted. The older sister started to cry. McKenna pulled her into a hug, and the girl collapsed into her arms like she'd been holding herself together for too long. Later that night, McKenna sat on the floor of the playroom, teaching the younger sister how to play Go Fish. The boy sat nearby, coloring, quietly, glancing up every few minutes like he was making sure she was still there. Leighton stood in the doorway, watching. He'd been in rooms with presidents, CEOs, power brokers who moved millions with a single phone call. But he'd never seen anything as powerful as the way McKenna's presence made those kids' shoulders drop, the way they started to breathe again. You're staring, Nora said, appearing beside him with a folder. I know, he admitted. She's good at this, Nora observed. She's better than good, Leighton said. She's the reason this place works. Nora glanced at him, a knowing smile on her face. You care about her. Of course I do, he said. She's my partner. That's not what I mean, Nora said gently. Leighton didn't respond, but he didn't deny it either. Because somewhere between the DNA test and the foundation and the late-night conversations, McKenna had stopped being just a mystery, or a partner, or even a friend. She'd become the person he couldn't imagine his life without, and that terrified him. Within 3 months, the foundation was full. 12 kids, 8 nannies, who'd been blacklisted and needed legal help, 2 social workers who believed in the mission, and a rotating team of volunteers who showed up because they'd heard McKenna's story and wanted to help. McKenna ran it all with the same fierce love she'd given to the kids she used to care for. She knew every name, every story, every fear, and every dream. She sat with kids who had nightmares, helped nannies file lawsuits against families who'd wronged them, fought with bureaucrats who tried to shut them down because they didn't fit the mold. And through it all, Leighton watched her become the woman she was always meant to be. One evening, after the kids were asleep and the staff had gone home, Leighton found McKenna sitting on the front steps, staring up at the sky. You okay? He asked, sitting down beside her. Yeah, she said softly. Just thinking. About what? About how different my life is now, she said. 6 months ago, I was holding a sign on a street corner, wondering if I'd ever matter to anyone again. And now, she gestured to the building behind them. Now I'm part of something that actually changes lives. You don't just change lives, Leighton said. You save them. She looked at him, eyes glassy. We saved them. Together. He nodded. Together. They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders almost touching, the night air cool around them. Leighton, she said quietly. Yeah? Thank you, she whispered. For not walking away. For believing in this. For believing in me. Always, he said. And he meant it. But as they sat there, McKenna's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, and her face went pale. What is it? Leighton asked, alarm rising in his voice. She turned the screen toward him. A message from Kai. I found another one. Baby M. She's in trouble. And if we don't move fast, she's going to disappear just like the others. Attached was a photo. A young woman, bruised and scared, holding a sign that read, Help me. And on her wrist, clear as day, was the same crooked mark. McKenna and Leighton locked eyes. We have to go, she said. Now, he agreed. They stood, adrenaline flooding their veins. Because the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. They found baby M 3 states away, living in a basement apartment, with bars on the windows and bruises she tried to hide under long sleeves. Her name was Simone. And when McKenna showed her the mark on her own wrist, Simone broke down and cried for 20 minutes straight. I thought I was the only one, she sobbed. I thought I was cursed. You're not cursed, McKenna said, pulling her into a hug. You're a survivor, and you're not alone anymore. They brought Simone back to the foundation, got her medical care, legal help, a safe bed and 3 meals a day, and slowly she started to breathe again, just like the others. By the end of the year, they'd found 8 of the 15 names on Carla's list. 8 people who'd been marked, lost, and forgotten. 8 lives that were finally being put back together. The foundation grew. More kids, more staff, more stories of redemption that made the exhaustion worth it. But as the work consumed them, something else was growing too. Something quieter. Something neither of them knew how to name. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, McKenna sat in the office, staring at a pile of paperwork she was too tired to finish. Leighton knocked softly on the doorframe. You're still up? Can't sleep, she admitted. Too much in my head. He walked in and sat across from her. Want to talk about it? She set down her pen and rubbed her eyes. Do you ever think about what our lives would have been like if we'd never met? All the time, he said quietly. And? She asked. And I think mine would have stayed empty, he admitted. I would have kept building towers and closing deals and pretending it mattered. But I wouldn't have felt anything. She looked at him, eyes soft. I think I would have stayed invisible. Just another person the world forgot. You were never invisible to me, he said. Her breath caught. Leighton. I mean it, he said, leaning forward. From the moment I saw you on that screen, you were the only thing I could see. She didn't know what to say, so she just sat there, heart pounding, feeling the weight of everything they'd been through settle between them. This is going to sound crazy, Leighton said slowly, but I think meeting you saved my life. You saved mine first, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Then I guess we're even. They sat in the quiet, the kind of silence that only comes when 2 people finally stop pretending. My mom used to say something, McKenna said softly. She'd say, God wastes nothing, even the ugliest parts. Somehow, he can still use them. Leighton tilted his head. Do you believe that? I didn't used to, she admitted. But now? Yeah, I think I do. Why? He asked. Because all the ugly parts, the fire, the mark, the years of not knowing, they all led me here, she said. To this foundation, to these kids, to you. His chest tightened. McKenna. I'm not saying it to make things complicated, she said quickly. I need you to know that you matter. Not because of your money or your company or what you can do, but because you showed up and you stayed. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just showing up. If you know someone who's shown up for you, let them know. Leighton stood and walked over to her. He crouched down beside her chair so they were eye level. You matter too, he said, voice rough with emotion. More than you'll ever know. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she'd been afraid to acknowledge. He wasn't just her partner. He wasn't just her friend. He was the person she'd been waiting for her whole life without knowing it. And that terrified her, because if she let herself love him, really love him, and he left, she didn't think she'd survive it. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of what?" he asked gently. "Of this," she said, gesturing between them. "Of what it could become. Of what it already is." He reached up and took her hand. "I'm scared too." "Then what do we do?" she asked. "We take it one day at a time," he said. "We keep showing up. We keep building. And we don't run just because it's scary." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Okay." He stood and pulled her to her feet. And for a moment, they just stood there, holding each other's hands, the space between them charged with everything they hadn't said. "Leighton?" she whispered. "Yeah? Thank you," she said, "for seeing me when no one else did." "Always," he said. And then, before either of them could overthink it, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. Soft, gentle, safe. It wasn't a declaration, but it was a promise. Later that night, McKenna lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. Her phone buzzed. A text from Leighton. "Can't sleep either. Want to talk?" She smiled and typed back. "Yeah." They talked until 3 a.m. About dreams. About fears. About what it meant to build something real in a world that kept trying to tear them down. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, McKenna realized something. She wasn't scared anymore, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. The next morning, she woke up to another message, but this one wasn't from Leighton. It was from Kai. "We have a problem. One of the 15 isn't who we thought, and if we don't act fast, everything we've built could fall apart." Attached was a file. McKenna opened it with shaking hands, and what she saw made her blood run cold. A photo of Carla Ruiz, younger, standing beside a man in a hospital uniform. The caption beneath it read, "Dr. Marcus Ruiz, Chief of Obstetrics, Street, Mercy General, arrested for child trafficking, 1992. McKenna's heart stopped. Carla's last name, Ruiz. She grabbed her phone and called Leighton. He answered on the first ring. "McKenna? What's wrong?" "We need to talk," she said, voice trembling. "Now. It's about Carla." "What about her?" McKenna stared at the photo, hands shaking. "I think she's been lying to us from the beginning." Carla sat across from them in the Foundation's office, hands folded, face pale but steady. "You knew," McKenna said, voice shaking with anger. "You knew about your husband. About what he did." Carla closed her eyes. "Yes, I knew." Leighton's fists clenched. "And you didn't think that was important to mention when we came to you for answers?" "I was ashamed," Carla whispered. "I didn't know what Marcus was doing until it was too late. By the time I found out, babies were already missing, records were already destroyed, and he was already dead." "Dead?" McKenna asked. "He died in prison 3 years after his arrest," Carla said. "Heart attack. But the damage was done. The trafficking, the lies, the children he sold to the highest bidder." Leighton leaned forward, jaw tight. "Were we part of that? Were we sold?" Carla shook her head quickly. "No, you were different. Leighton, you were found abandoned. McKenna, your mother fought for you. You weren't part of his operation. But the chaos, he created the broken systems, the lost records. That's what made it possible for you both to slip through the cracks. So, we were collateral damage," McKenna said bitterly. "You were survivors," Carla corrected. "And I've spent 30 years trying to make up for what my husband did. That's why I kept the notebook. That's why I came forward when I saw you on the news. I wanted to help fix what he broke." Silence filled the room. Leighton stared at her, torn between anger and understanding. "How many babies did he traffic?" "We don't know," Carla admitted. "At least 7 that we could confirm. But there could be more. The fire destroyed so much evidence." "And the others?" McKenna asked. "The 15 names on your list. Were any of them victims?" "I don't know," Carla said, voice breaking. That's what I've been trying to figure out for 3 decades. Some were adopted legally, some were taken by agencies, some just disappeared. McKenna stood abruptly, pacing. So everything we've been doing, finding these people, building this foundation, it's all connected to a man who trafficked children? No, Leighton said firmly, standing too. It's connected to us choosing to fix what he broke. That's different. McKenna turned to him, eyes filled with tears. Is it? What if we're just cleaning up someone else's mess? Then we're doing what no one else would, Leighton said. And that matters. Carla stood slowly. I understand if you hate me. I understand if you never want to see me again. But please, don't let my husband's sins stop you from helping the people who need it. McKenna stared at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. We won't, but you need to leave. Now. Carla nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. For everything you're doing. For being better than we were. She walked out, leaving McKenna and Leighton standing in the heavy silence. Are we doing the right thing? McKenna asked quietly. Yes, Leighton said without hesitation. Because we're not defined by where we came from. We're defined by what we choose to do now. She looked at him, something shifting in her chest. When did you get so wise? About the time I met you, he said with a faint smile. She walked over to him and took his hand. I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have survived, he said. You always do. Maybe, she said, but I wouldn't have lived. There's a difference. He pulled her into a hug, and she let herself melt into him, finally allowing herself to feel safe. We did it, she whispered against his chest. We found 8 of them. We built something real. We made a difference. We're not done yet, he said. There are still 7 more out there. I know, she said, but right now, I just want to breathe. He held her tighter, then breathe. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other, the weight of the past finally starting to lift. 1 year later, the foundation had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. 23 kids, 15 staff members, legal victories against families who'd abused their power, national recognition, media coverage, real, lasting change. And through it all, McKenna and Leighton stood side by side, not as siblings, not as strangers, but as partners, as friends, as something more. One evening, they stood on the foundation's front steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Do you ever think about that day? McKenna asked. The day you saw me on TV? Every day, Leighton admitted. Do you regret it? She asked. Flying across the country for a stranger? He turned to her, eyes serious. Not for a single second. She smiled. Me neither. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Her breath caught. Leighton, I'm not proposing, he said quickly, opening the box. Not yet, but I wanted to give you this. Inside was a silver bracelet. Engraved on it was a simple symbol, a crooked crescent with a broken line. Their mark. I had it made, he said. To remind you that the thing you thought was a curse was actually a map. A map that led you here, to this foundation, to these kids, to me. Tears streamed down her face as he slipped it onto her wrist. It's perfect. So are you, he said softly. She looked up at him, heart full. I love you. He smiled, eyes glassy. I love you too. And then he kissed her. Not on the forehead, not as a promise for someday, but as a declaration, as a beginning. When they pulled apart, McKenna looked at the mark on her wrist, then at the bracelet beside it. My mom was right, she whispered. God really does waste nothing. No, Leighton agreed. He doesn't. They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the sun dipped below the horizon. 2 people who'd been lost in the same fire. 2 people who'd been marked by the same broken system. 2 people who'd refused to stay forgotten. And now, they were home. Not because they shared blood, but because they'd chosen each other. Every single day. Some stories don't end, they turn into something better. If this one changed you, even a little, don't let it end here. Share it. Someone else might need to hear it. Inside the foundation, the lights glowed warm. Laughter echoed through the halls. Kids who'd been invisible were finally seen. And two people who'd spent their whole lives wondering where they belonged had finally found their answer. In each other. In the work. In the knowledge that sometimes, the worst things that happen to us are just the beginning of the best things we'll ever build. The mark on their wrists would always be there. But now, it wasn't a scar. It was a reminder that they survived, that they fought back, and that love, real, lasting, transformative love, can grow even in the ashes of tragedy. This was their story, and it was just beginning.